I'm Ivy, 27, and I've always been the family disappointment. 2 years ago, during what should have been a normal dinner, my father's words cut deeper than any knife could. "You're nothing but a burden." He snapped, his face red with anger. Then my brother Justin twisted the blade further. "No one would miss you if you left." So I did exactly that without tears or drama. I simply disappeared from their lives. This week I received an unexpected voicemail that began with, "Please come home." Before I dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if my journey resonates with you. Now let's go back to where it all began. Growing up in Hartwell, a middle-class suburban neighborhood in Michigan, I always felt like I was living in someone else's shadow. Our family of four looked picture perfect, from the outside: hard-working father Richard, supportive mother Diana, brilliant older brother Justin, and then there was me, Ivy, the afterthought. My father worked as a mechanical engineer at a local manufacturing company, proud of his steady career and providing for his family. My mother taught elementary school, always tired but smiling. Justin was 3 years older, athletic, outgoing, and undeniably my father's pride and joy. From my earliest memories, the contrast was clear. When Justin scored his first goal in soccer at age 6, my father lifted him onto his shoulders, parading him around the field. When I won my first art contest at 7, my artwork was placed on the refrigerator for exactly 3 days before being replaced by Justin's B+ math quiz. "Art is a nice hobby, Ivy," my father said when I showed him my blue ribbon. "But it's not something to get too excited about." This pattern continued throughout elementary school. Justin's baseball trophies occupied the living room mantel, while my academic achievements and artistic recognitions were acknowledged with quick, distracted nods. During parent-teacher conferences, my teachers would gush about my creative writing skills and artistic talent, but my father would invariably ask, "How is she doing in math and science? Those are the subjects that matter." I learned to seek validation elsewhere, developing a small but tight circle of friends who appreciated my quirky personality and creative perspective. My best friend Zoe became my refuge during difficult times. Her family welcomed me with genuine warmth, making their home a place where I felt truly seen. "You know what I love about you, Ivy?" Zoe said once while we were working on an art project in 6th grade. "You see things differently than everyone else. It's like you have magic eyes." Those words sustained me through many difficult evenings at home, where conversations revolved around Justin's accomplishments, college prospects, and future potential. By high school, the emotional neglect had become more subtle, but no less painful. When I was accepted into advanced placement art, my mother congratulated me but added, "Just make sure it doesn't affect your grades in other subjects." When Justin was named captain of the debate team, my father took the entire family out for a celebration dinner. I threw myself into creative pursuits, finding solace in painting, photography, and graphic design. My art teacher, Ms. Thompson, became my mentor and advocate, encouraging me to develop a portfolio for college applications. "You have a unique voice, Ivy," she told me during my junior year. "Don't let anyone silence it." Meanwhile, the contrast between Justin and me grew starker. He was tall, charismatic, and socially adept, president of the student council and captain of the track team. I was quieter, more introspective, president of the art club, but invisible in the school's social hierarchy. Justin drove a used but well-maintained car that my father helped him purchase. I took the bus or walked. My mother occasionally attempted to bridge the gap, suggesting family activities or trying to highlight my achievements during dinner conversations. But her efforts were usually overridden by my father's dismissiveness or Justin's ability to redirect attention to himself. "Ivy got an A on her English essay," my mother would mention. Speaking of school, Justin would interject, "Coach says I might get scouted by state colleges this season." And just like that, the conversation would shift, leaving my achievement forgotten. By senior year, I had developed a protective shell around my heart. I learned to expect nothing, to celebrate my wins privately, and to find joy in small moments away from family scrutiny. My room became my sanctuary, walls covered with artwork and photography, a visual representation of the world inside my head that no one at home seemed interested in exploring. When college acceptance letters started arriving, Justin's from the prestigious business school at the University of Michigan came first. The entire house celebrated for a week. My father even took time off work to drive Justin to a special campus tour for accepted students. 2 weeks later, when I received my acceptance to the Chicago Institute of Arts on a partial scholarship, I kept it to myself for 3 days before casually mentioning it at dinner. Chicago. My father frowned. That's expensive and impractical. Are you sure you wouldn't rather go to state and study something useful? Richard, my mother interjected softly. It's a good school and Ivy got a scholarship. Not a full one, he countered. And art degrees don't exactly guarantee employment. Justin, ever the diplomat when it served him, added, It's not bad for a backup plan, I guess. That night I cried silently into my pillow, not from sadness, but from determination. Chicago represented freedom, validation, and the possibility of becoming someone outside the confines of being Justin's less impressive sister. I would go with or without their emotional support. Art wasn't just my passion, it was my escape route. Chicago felt like breathing for the first time after years of having someone stand on my chest. The sprawling campus of the Chicago Institute of Arts welcomed misfits, dreamers, and creators like me. For once, I wasn't the odd one out for seeing beauty in unexpected places, or spending hours sketching rather than socializing. Move-in day was telling. While other parents helped unpack arranged dorm rooms and tearfully embraced their children, my parents dropped me off with minimal fuss. My father had a work meeting later that day, so our goodbye was brief and practical. Call if you need anything, my mother said, hugging me tightly. I could see in her eyes she wanted to say more. Not too often, though, my father added, checking his watch. We're paying good money for you to study, not socialize. Justin hadn't even come along, citing a pre-semester fraternity event he couldn't miss. As they drove away, I stood outside my residence hall feeling both abandoned and liberated. That evening I met my roommate Samantha, a photography major from Portland, with bright blue hair and a laugh that filled the room. Your family gone already? She asked, noticing my unpacked boxes, while her parents were still hanging curtains and organizing her desk. They had to get back, I said simply. Well, you've got me now, she replied, throwing an arm around my shoulders. Family by choice is sometimes better than family by blood. I didn't know then how prophetic those words would become. That first semester was a revelation. Professors valued my creative perspective and pushed me to develop my voice rather than conform to rigid expectations. I discovered my passion for graphic design, blending artistic vision with practical applications. For the first time, I excelled without feeling guilty about it, celebrated achievements without them being compared to someone else's. My phone calls home grew less frequent. Every Sunday evening, conversation followed the same pattern, my mother asking polite questions about classes, my father inquiring about grades, and whether my expensive art education was proving worthwhile, and inevitably updates about Justin's amazing college experience. Your brother made the dean's list again, my father announced during one call, and he's been selected for an internship at Goldman Sachs next summer. That's great, I replied automatically. I had my design featured in the student showcase this week. That's nice, dear, my mother said. Is it something you can put on your resume? By sophomore year, I limited calls to twice a month. By junior year, once a month seemed sufficient. I spent Thanksgiving with Samantha's family, Christmas with my own, was an exercise in restraint, and spring breaks were dedicated to internships and building my portfolio. During my junior year, I met Lucas in a digital media class. Tall, with thoughtful brown eyes and a quiet confidence, he was a film major with a minor in graphic design. Our partnership on a class project evolved into coffee dates, which turned into dinners, museum visits, and eventually a relationship built on mutual respect and understanding. Tell me about your family, he asked one evening as we walked along Lake Michigan. I gave him the sanitized version, mentioning my father's engineering career, my mother's teaching position, and Justin's business success. And where do you fit in their world? He pressed gently. The question caught me off guard. No one had ever asked me that before. I don't, I admitted after a long pause. I never have. Lucas squeezed my hand. Their loss. That simple acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. Lucas became another anchor in my Chicago life, along with Samantha and my growing circle of artistic friends who valued authenticity over achievement, creativity over conformity. Graduation approached with mixed emotions. I had secured an internship at a small but respected design agency in Chicago, which offered the possibility of full-time employment afterward. My parents attended the ceremony looking somewhat out of place among the eclectic families of art students. "Congratulations," my father said stiffly as I met them after receiving my diploma. "I hope this leads to something stable." "Richard," my mother chided softly. "We're proud of you, Ivy," she added, though her eyes darted to my father as if seeking approval for this statement. Justin came too, having graduated the previous year and already working at a financial firm in Detroit. "Not bad, little sister," he said, ruffling my hair like I was still 12. "Maybe you can design my company's brochures someday if you need freelance work." The backhanded compliment stung, but I was beyond seeking their validation. My life was in Chicago now, among people who saw my value without qualifications. The internship converted to a junior designer position, and while the pay was modest, it was enough to share a small apartment with Samantha in Wicker Park. Lucas lived nearby, and our relationship deepened. For 2 years, I built a life independent of my family's expectations, visiting Michigan only for obligatory holidays, each visit shorter than the last. Every trip home reinforced my decision to keep my distance. Conversations around the dinner table inevitably centered on Justin's rapid career advancement, his girlfriend from a good family, and his sensible investments. My creative achievements were acknowledged with polite disinterest, followed quickly by questions about financial stability and career prospects. "Digital design is so competitive," my father would say. "What's your backup plan?" There was never a question about Justin's backup plan. His path was presumed golden without the possibility of failure. By the third year after graduation, my visits had dwindled to Christmas only with excuses about work deadlines keeping me away for other holidays. The distance felt necessary for my survival, a boundary that protected the confident, creative person I was becoming from the insecure, invisible daughter I had been. I didn't know that fate had other plans, that economic forces beyond my control would soon push me back into the very environment I had so carefully escaped. The recession hit the creative industry like a tsunami, washing away jobs, contracts, and security with indiscriminate force. Our design agency, being small and dependent on clients with discretionary marketing budgets, was among the first casualties. 2 years and 4 months after graduation, I found myself in the conference room with 11 colleagues listening to our founder explain through tears that the company was shutting down. "I've tried everything," she said, voice breaking. "I've called in favors, cut costs to the bone, even foregone my own salary for the last 3 months. It's not enough." We were given 2 weeks severance, generous under the circumstances, and glowing recommendations. The Chicago job market was flooded with creative professionals like me, all competing for the few positions still available. For 2 months, I lived off savings applied to every design position within a 100-mile radius, picked up small freelance jobs, and watched my bank account dwindle alarmingly. Lucas himself, struggling with reduced hours at the production company where he worked, offered to let me move in, but pride kept me from accepting. "I need to stand on my own," I insisted, even as I calculated how many more weeks I could afford rent. Samantha had moved to New York for a photography position 6 months earlier, leaving me with a new roommate who was now making noise about needing someone who could reliably pay their share. The call to my mother was one of the hardest I'd ever made. "Of course you can come home," she said immediately, "for as long as you need." I could hear the concern in her voice, but also something else, a hint of satisfaction perhaps, as if my independent life had been a phase rather than a choice, and my return would restore the natural order. Packing my Chicago life into my used Honda Civic felt like admitting defeat. Lucas helped both of us, pretending this was temporary, just a strategic retreat. "You'll be back before you know it," he said, kissing me goodbye. "We'll make it work long distance." The drive to Michigan was a blur of gray highways and grayer thoughts. The family home looked exactly the same: the tidy lawn, the sensible 4-bedroom colonial, the basketball hoop above the garage where Justin had practiced for countless hours. Nothing had changed, which somehow made everything worse. My mother welcomed me with open arms and a prepared bedroom, my old space untouched except for newer linens and a cleared desk, for your job search." My father's greeting was more reserved, a mixture of parental concern and unspoken judgment. "The design industry is fickle," he said over dinner that first night. "This is why we suggested a more practical degree." Justin, who happened to be visiting that weekend, was less subtle. "The market rewards valuable skills," he said, cutting his steak. "Maybe this is an opportunity to pivot to something more stable." I bit my tongue. I needed a roof over my head more than I needed to defend my career choice. The first week wasn't terrible. I established a routine of job applications, portfolio updates, and networking emails. My mother gave me space occasionally, leaving job postings from the local paper on my desk, administrative positions and receptionist roles at insurance companies. Nothing remotely creative. By the second week, the questions began. "How long do these job searches typically take?" my father asked over breakfast. "Hard to say in this economy," I answered. "I'm focusing on remote positions so I can work from anywhere." He replied, clearly skeptical. "Your brother's firm is actually hiring in their marketing department. Not design work, but it's something. He could put in a word." The thought of working under Justin's recommendation being the charity case he magnanimously helped made my stomach turn. "I'll keep that as an option," I lied. Week 3 brought the first pointed comments about finances. "Groceries are more expensive with 3 people," my father noted while reviewing bills at the dining table. "And the utilities, too." "I can contribute from my savings," I offered immediately. "That's not necessary," my mother interjected. "You need to conserve your funds." "She also needs to understand the realities of being an adult," my father countered. "Nothing is free in this world." The comment stung, implying I'd somehow expected handouts rather than being caught in an economic downturn beyond my control. By the 1-month mark, I had secured a few small freelance projects, a logo for a local bakery, a website refresh for a former professor's consulting business, but nothing substantial enough to fund a return to independence. Each day at home reinforced my status as the family disappointment, the creative dreamer whose impractical choices had led to predictable failure. The worst moments came when I overheard conversations not meant for me. One evening from the kitchen, where I was quietly working on a freelance project, I heard my parents in the living room. "I don't understand why she can't just apply for regular jobs," my father said, voice low but clear enough. "Her brother never had these problems." "She's trying, Richard," my mother replied. "The economy is difficult right now." "It's difficult for everyone, but people with useful skills still find employment. This artsy phase should have ended after high school. Now she's almost 30 with nothing to show for it." I was 27, not almost 30, and had plenty to show for my year's award-winning designs, a respected portfolio, professional connections, and most importantly, personal growth, none of which registered as valuable in my father's ledger of success. Justin's visits became particularly trying. He would breeze in with stories of promotions, bonuses, and his new condo, then offer unsolicited career advice. "You should really consider corporate communications," he said during one Sunday dinner. "It's adjacent to design but much more stable. I could introduce you to our department head." "I appreciate the thought," I replied, pushing food around my plate. "But I'm focused on staying in my field." "Being stubborn won't pay the bills," my father chimed in. "Sometimes we have to adapt." "I am adapting," I said, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. "I've expanded into web design, UX, UI, and digital marketing. I'm learning new software and taking online courses to enhance my skills." "Yet here you are," Justin pointed out with a shrug. Here I was indeed trapped in a house where my very presence was viewed as evidence of my failure, rather than a temporary setback in an otherwise promising career path. The daily friction began to wear on my spirit. Each morning brought subtle digs about sleeping past 7, though I often worked on freelance projects until 2 or 3 a.m. Each dinner conversation somehow circled back to sensible career paths and financial security. Even my mother's attempts at support felt hollow, colored by her unwillingness to contradict my father's assessment of my choices. After 2 months of this slow emotional torture, I landed a promising opportunity, a 3-month contract with a sustainability nonprofit, creating their annual report and refreshing their brand identity. The pay was modest, but significant enough to begin planning my escape. I shared the news at dinner, trying to contain my excitement. It could lead to more nonprofit work, which is actually a growing sector for designers. My father's response was predictably deflating. 3 months isn't job security, Ivy, and nonprofits are the first to cut corners when funding gets tight. It's a step, Dad, I said, struggling to maintain composure. And it's in my field doing meaningful work. Meaningful doesn't pay student loans, Justin added, reaching for more potatoes. But I guess it's better than nothing. I looked to my mother, hoping for some defense, but she merely offered a tight smile. We just want you to be secure, honey. Secure. Not fulfilled, not passionate, not utilizing my talents, just secure. It was the family mantra, the yardstick by which all choices were measured. Security over passion, stability over fulfillment, practicality over purpose. That night, I emailed the nonprofit to accept the contract, then began researching shared housing options back in Chicago. I needed to endure just a little longer to swallow my pride and weather the constant undermining of my confidence and choices. 3 more months in this house of subtle cruelty and conditional love. I didn't realize then that I wouldn't last 3 weeks, let alone 3 months. The breaking point was approaching faster than any of us could have anticipated, a collision of resentments and harsh truths that would sever family ties and set me on an entirely new path. The evening that changed everything began ordinarily enough. My mother had prepared a special dinner to celebrate Justin's promotion to senior financial analyst, complete with his favorite foods and a store-bought cake with congratulations written in blue icing. I helped set the table, arranged flowers in a vase, and even put on a nice blouse instead of my usual work-from-home attire. Justin arrived with his girlfriend Megan, a marketing executive with a perfect blowout and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. My father opened a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for a special occasion. Apparently my contract work didn't qualify, but I pushed the thought aside, determined to be pleasant. To Justin, my father toasted, raising his glass, following in his old man's footsteps, climbing the corporate ladder with determination and smart choices. Everyone clinked glasses. I sipped the champagne, which tasted bitter despite its expensive label. Dinner conversation revolved entirely around Justin's accomplishments, the clients he'd impressed, the strategies he'd developed, the recognition from his superiors. Megan smiled adoringly, adding anecdotes about how hard he worked and how respected he was at the firm. And they're fast-tracking you for management, right, babe? She prompted, touching his arm. It's been mentioned, Justin said with false modesty. Nothing official yet. It's just a matter of time, my father assured him. Men with your drive don't go unnoticed. I picked at my food, feeling increasingly invisible. This was familiar territory, but somehow being back under my parents' roof made it more acute, harder to dismiss with adult perspective. As dessert was served, I decided to share my small victory. I got some good news today, too, I said during a brief lull. The nonprofit client was impressed with my initial concepts. They're considering extending the contract to include their sister organization's rebranding. My mother smiled. That's nice, dear. My father glanced up briefly. Is there more money in that? Some, I acknowledged. But more importantly, it's a foot in the door with a network of environmental organizations that all need design work. He responded, turning back to Justin. So tell me more about the new client portfolio you'll be managing. The dismissal was so casual, so complete, that something snapped inside me. Years of similar moments crystallized into a single point of clarity. Nothing I achieved would ever be enough in this house. Actually, I interrupted, setting down my fork with more force than necessary. I'd like to finish telling you about my project. It's important to me, and if family is supposed to support each other, maybe you could listen for 30 seconds. The table fell silent. My mother looked alarmed. Justin raised his eyebrows, and Megan suddenly became very interested in her cake. My father's face darkened. There's no need for that tone, Ivy. We're celebrating your brother's achievement tonight. We're always celebrating Justin, I replied, unable to stop now that the dam had broken. My entire life has been a footnote to his story. Do you realize you've never once, not once, celebrated anything I've accomplished with even a fraction of this enthusiasm? That's not true, my mother interjected weakly. It is true, I countered. When I graduated with honors, we had a regular dinner. When I won the Regional Design Award last year, Dad asked if it came with prize money. Nothing I do matters in this family. Justin sighed dramatically. Here we go with the victim routine. Some of us work hard in fields that matter, Ivy. We can't all draw pictures for a living and expect parades. I don't expect a parade, I said, voice shaking. I expect basic respect for my career and my choices. I expect my family to recognize that success isn't only measured by salary or job title. Success is measured by independence, my father interjected, face reddening. By not having to move back home at 27 because your impractical career choice left you unemployable. The words hit like physical blows, but I was beyond caring now. I'm here because of an economic recession that eliminated millions of jobs, not because my career choice is invalid. And I've been working every day to get back on my feet while you constantly undermine my confidence and dismiss my field. We took you in when you had nowhere else to go, my father countered, voice rising. We've provided food, shelter, and support, and all you've done is mope around feeling sorry for yourself instead of taking practical steps towards stable employment. I have been taking practical steps. I've been freelancing, networking, upgrading my skills. Playing around on your computer isn't work, he snapped. Richard, my mother warned, glancing nervously at Megan, clearly concerned about airing family drama in front of a guest. But my father was too far gone. He slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. I'm tired of this entitlement attitude. We've given you everything, education opportunities, a safety net, and what have you done with it? Nothing but make excuses and expect handouts. I've never asked for handouts, I said, my voice now eerily calm as a strange clarity washed over me. I offered to contribute to expenses. I've been buying groceries. I cook and clean. I'm not a freeloader. You're nothing but a burden. He snapped, the words precise and cutting. A financial and emotional drain on this family with your artistic temperament and impractical expectations. The table fell silent. Even Justin looked uncomfortable, but only for a moment before he added his own knife twist. Maybe it would be better for everyone if you figured things out on your own for a while, he said with a shrug. No one would miss you if you left. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to contradict them, to offer some defense of her daughter. She stared at her plate, silent. That silence hurt more than all the spoken words combined. I stood up slowly, napkin placed carefully beside my half-eaten dessert. Thank you for clarifying where I stand. I'll no longer burden any of you with my presence. Ivy, don't be dramatic, Justin called as I walked away. We're just being honest. I didn't respond. In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, strangely calm. The truth once spoken aloud had broken something irreparable between us, but it had also freed me from the exhausting quest for approval I would never receive. Dinner continued downstairs without me, voices and occasional laughter floating up through the floorboards as if nothing momentous had occurred. I was so insignificant in the family dynamic that my absence barely registered as a ripple. In that moment of painful clarity, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. I would leave not with drama or proclamations, but quietly and definitively. I would reclaim my independence on my terms, even if it meant starting over with nothing but my talent and determination. I began to plan my exit not as an emotional reaction, but as a strategic decision to save myself from a toxic environment that had never nurtured my spirit and never would. While the house slept, I moved efficiently through my room, separating essentials from things that could be replaced. My portfolio, laptop, external hard drives, and design tools were non-negotiable. Clothes could be limited to a week's worth, enough to get by until I stabilized. Books, mementos, and decorative items would stay behind. This wasn't an impulsive midnight escape. It was a calculated rebirth. By 3 a.m., my car was packed with everything that truly mattered. I sat at the small desk by the window and wrote a brief note on the monogrammed stationery my mother had given me last Christmas. I'm taking your advice and removing my burden from your lives. Don't worry about contacting me. I'll reach out when I'm established. Please respect my decision as I respect your honesty. Ivy. No emotional appeals, no accusations, no burning bridges, just a dignified acknowledgement that we had reached an impasse. I placed the note on my perfectly made bed, took a final look around the room that had never really felt like mine, and slipped quietly down the stairs. The house was silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, marking the seconds of my final moments in this chapter of my life. The pre-dawn air was cool as I backed out of the driveway, headlights off, until I reached the street. Only then did I allow myself a single glance in the rearview mirror at the darkened house before focusing firmly ahead. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I drove east as the sun rose, painting the sky in hopeful shades of pink and gold. The Chicago skyline welcomed me back like an old friend around 9 a.m., familiar yet somehow new from this perspective, a city of possibility rather than loss. My first call was to Samantha, who answered groggy and confused by my early morning contact. "Ivy, what's going on? Are you okay?" I explained the situation concisely without self-pity. "I need a place to crash for a bit while I get reorganized. I can contribute to rent with my freelance work, and I'll find my own place as soon as possible." Her response was immediate and uncomplicated. "My couch is your couch for as long as you need. I'm at work until 6, but Mrs. Petrovich still has the spare key in the fake rock by the back door." No questions about whether I was overreacting, no suggestions to reconcile, just simple acceptance and support, the response of true family. My next call was to Lucas, who reacted with similar unconditional support. "I'll come over after my shift," he said. "We'll figure this out together." For the first time since losing my job, I felt a curious mixture of grief and freedom. Grief for the family relationships I had finally accepted would never fulfill my emotional needs, and freedom from the exhausting effort of trying to earn approval that would perpetually remain just out of reach. Samantha's apartment was a small one-bedroom in Bucktown, cluttered with photography equipment and eclectic thrift store finds. The couch was lumpy, but represented safety and acceptance, two things I hadn't felt in my parents' immaculate guest room. I unpacked only what I needed for the next few days, leaving the rest in my car. Setting up my laptop on Samantha's kitchen table, I immediately updated my portfolio website and LinkedIn profile to show I was back in Chicago and available for work. I sent emails to former colleagues, clients, and industry contacts, briefly explaining my return and expressing interest in projects. By evening, when Lucas arrived with takeout Thai food and a bottle of wine, I had already received 2 responses with potential leads. "You seem different," he observed as we ate on the floor using milk crates as a makeshift table. "More centered somehow." "I am," I realized. "For the first time, I'm not trying to be someone's version of successful. I'm just being Ivy." "I've always liked Ivy," he said, touching his container to mine in a makeshift toast. What surprised me most in those first days was the silence from my family. No calls, no texts, not even an email asking if I was safe. My dramatic exit, or rather my undramatic but definitive departure, had been accepted without question. It confirmed what I had suspected, but never fully acknowledged my presence in their lives had been an obligation, not a joy. Instead of devastating me, this realization was oddly liberating. The absence of their judgment created space for self-acceptance to grow. I wasn't failing to meet their standards. I was succeeding at being authentically myself. Within a week, I had secured a 3-month freelance contract with a sustainable apparel company, paying just enough to cover basics and contribute to Samantha's household expenses. Within 2 weeks, the nonprofit project had indeed expanded to include their partner organization. By the 3-week mark, I had established a daily routine of work networking and self-care that felt more sustainable than anything I'd experienced in Michigan. Samantha's couch became a home base from which I rebuilt my professional identity. Lucas became a constant presence, helping me navigate the emotional aftermath of family estrangement while respecting my need for independence. "You could move in with me," he offered one evening as we walked along the lakefront. "My roommate is moving out next month." "I need to do this on my own first," I explained. "Not because I don't value what we have, but because I need to prove to myself that I can." He understood without being told that my need for self-reliance wasn't about him. It was about healing the part of me that had been told I was incapable, impractical, a burden. As days turned to weeks and weeks to months, the silence from Michigan continued. No acknowledgement of holidays, my birthday, or any of the professional milestones I shared on social media. It was as if I had never existed in their narrative, which in many ways had always been the case. Occasionally, the absence would hit unexpectedly, seeing a father and daughter laughing together in a cafe, hearing a woman my mother's age use the same turn of phrase, catching a glimpse of someone with Justin's confident stride. But these moments grew less frequent, less painful, as I built a life defined by choice, rather than obligation. 6 months after my pre-dawn departure, I signed a lease on a tiny studio apartment in Pilsen, affordable, filled with natural light, and most importantly, mine alone. The day I moved in carrying secondhand furniture up 3 flights of stairs with help from Samantha Lucas and 2 designer friends from my growing professional network, I felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with external validation. That night alone in my new space, I unpacked the last box containing frames for the walls. Among them was a single photo from before a candid shot from my college graduation, caught in a rare moment where my mother was hugging me and actually looking proud. I placed it on a shelf, not as a shrine to what was lost, but as a reminder of the complexity of family, how love and disappointment can coexist, how people can care without knowing how to show it properly. I was building a life that honored my creativity and resilience, surrounded by people who valued me for exactly who I was. The burden had been lifted, not because I had left my family, but because I had released the weight of their expectations and replaced it with self-acceptance. The year that followed my departure became a period of professional growth and personal healing that I couldn't have imagined while sitting in my childhood bedroom, feeling like a failure. The nonprofit contracts led to connections with other mission-driven organizations, creating a niche specialty that aligned perfectly with my values. My tiny studio became a haven of creativity walls, adorned with inspiration boards and sketches for projects that excited me each morning. Lucas and I settled into a relationship that honored independence alongside togetherness, spending weekends and several weeknights together while maintaining our separate spaces. Samantha remained my closest confidant, the sister of my heart, who never questioned my worth or potential. "You know what I love about our friendship group," she said during a small dinner party at my apartment 6 months after I'd moved in. "We celebrate each other's wins without keeping score." It was true. When I landed a significant contract designing an entire campaign for an environmental coalition, my chosen family threw an impromptu celebration. When Lucas was selected for a film festival, we all attended the screening wearing matching custom t-shirts I'd designed. When Samantha's photography was featured in a local gallery, we organized an after-party that lasted until dawn. These celebrations weren't about measuring success against some predefined standard. They were genuine expressions of joy for each other's growth and achievements, big or small. Meanwhile, the silence from Michigan continued unbroken. Thanksgiving came and went, spent with Lucas's warm, chaotic family, who asked interested questions about my work and actually listened to the answers. Christmas passed with the chosen family gift exchange in Samantha's apartment filled with laughter and inside jokes. My birthday arrived in February, marked by a surprise party organized by Lucas, complete with a cake decorated with miniature art supplies made from fondant. No call came from my parents or Justin, though I'd seen via social media that they remembered his birthday 3 weeks earlier with the usual fanfare. The absence ached sometimes, but in an abstract way, like a phantom limb pain for something that had never really been functional to begin with. I had stopped checking my phone, expectantly, stopped drafting emails that remained unsent, stopped wondering if today would be the day they recognized what they had lost. Then came an unexpected professional breakthrough. A major environmental advocacy organization hired me to redesign their entire visual identity, including logo, website, print materials, and social media assets. The contract was the largest of my career, enough to provide stability for 6 months and add a significant portfolio piece that could attract similar high-profile clients. "We chose you specifically because of your work with sustainability nonprofits," the director explained during our first meeting. "Your designs aren't just beautiful, they tell stories that inspire action." For the first time, I felt fully validated in my career choice. My impractical degree and unstable field had positioned me perfectly for this moment. The specific talents my family had dismissed as hobbies were exactly what this client valued. The day I signed the contract, I treated myself to dinner at a restaurant I normally couldn't afford, ordered champagne, and toasted my own resilience. Later that evening, I called Lucas to share the news. "We need to celebrate properly this weekend," he said, his pride evident even through the phone. "This is huge, Ivy." "It feels huge," I agreed. "Like a turning point." "You've been turning points into pathways for a while now," he noted. "Ever since that night you decided to leave." The observation stayed with me as I worked late into the evening on initial concepts for the project. He was right, the decision to leave hadn't been the end of something, but the beginning of everything that mattered. A month into the environmental organization project, Lucas proposed during a weekend trip to a lakeside cabin. The ring was a simple band with a small emerald rather than a diamond, perfectly aligned with my aesthetic and values. "I'm not asking you to change anything about your life or your independence," he said as we sat on the dock watching the sunset. "I'm just asking if I can be your permanent teammate through whatever comes next." I said yes without hesitation, knowing this commitment came from choice rather than expectation or obligation. We decided on a long engagement, at least a year, with no rush toward traditional milestones. Our relationship had always developed at its own pace on its own terms. 2 weeks later, as spring finally took hold in Chicago, I found a larger apartment, a true one-bedroom with enough space for a dedicated work area and room to breathe. Moving up from my starter studio felt symbolic, a testament to growing into myself professionally and personally. It was while setting up my new workspace that I received a notification on my phone, an email from a prospective client who had found my portfolio online and wanted to discuss a potential project. The name caught my attention immediately: Diana Bennett, my mother. The message was brief and formal. "I'm interested in discussing a website design for my retirement project, a resource for elementary school teachers. Please contact me at your convenience to discuss details." No acknowledgement of our relationship. No mention of the year of silence. Just a business inquiry as if from a stranger. I stared at the screen for a long time, emotions cycling through confusion, anger, hope, and suspicion. Was this an attempt at reconciliation disguised as professional interest? A way to re-establish contact without addressing the painful words that had driven me away? Or perhaps a test to see if I was truly succeeding in my chosen field? After careful consideration, I responded with equal formality. "Thank you for your interest in my design services. I have availability next month for new projects and would be happy to discuss your needs. Please let me know if you'd like to schedule a video consultation." Her reply came the next day, scheduling a call for the following week. I prepared as I would for any client meeting, creating a presentation of relevant portfolio pieces and questions about her project requirements. Only the slight tremor in my hands betrayed the emotional undercurrent. When her face appeared on my screen at the appointed time, I was struck by subtle changes: more gray in her hair, deeper lines around her eyes, a certain weariness in her posture. She looked older than just a year would account for. "Hello, Ivy," she said, her voice neutral but not cold. "Thank you for making time for this." "Of course," I replied, slipping into professional mode. "Tell me about your project." For 20 minutes, we discussed her vision for a website that would share her accumulated teaching resources with other educators upon her retirement. I asked relevant questions, took notes, and offered preliminary thoughts on structure and design approach, all while a surreal awareness hummed beneath the surface that this was my mother, who hadn't spoken to me in a year now, engaging me as a professional. As the call neared its scheduled end, she paused, her business persona faltering. "Your portfolio is impressive. You've built quite a career." "Thank you," I said, unsure where this was heading. "I always knew you were talented," she added, a hint of emotion cracking through. "Even when I didn't say it enough." The acknowledgement, small as it was, opened a hairline fracture in the wall I'd built. "Was there anything else you wanted to discuss about the project?" I asked, giving her an opportunity without pushing. She looked down briefly, then met my eyes through the screen. "Your father had a heart attack 3 months ago." The news hit like a physical blow. Whatever I had expected, it wasn't this. "Is he—" I couldn't finish the question. "He's recovering," she said quickly. "It was moderate, not severe. But it's been a wake-up call for all of us." I nodded, processing. "I'm glad he's recovering." He's changed Ivy. We all have. When you left, she trailed off, composing herself. We didn't think you'd actually go. And then when you didn't come back or call. You didn't call either, I pointed out, keeping my tone even. No, she acknowledged. Pride and hurt on all sides, I suppose. We sat in silence for a moment, the professional pretense now completely abandoned. I would like to hire you for this website, she said finally. You're exactly the right designer for it. But I also… She took a deep breath. I also miss my daughter. The simple admission broke something loose inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a willingness to consider that healing might be possible. I've changed too, I told her. I won't go back to being the person who was constantly seeking approval and never receiving it. I wouldn't want you to, she said, surprising me. I'm proud of the independent woman you've become. We handled everything wrong, Ivy. So wrong. It wasn't a full apology, but it was a beginning. We agreed to proceed with the website project as a professional engagement with personal reconciliation as a separate parallel process that would require time and effort from both sides. As the call ended, she said, Justin asks about you sometimes. And your father. He keeps your graduation photo on his bedside table now. I didn't know what to make of that information, whether it represented genuine regret or merely the sentimentality that often comes with health scares. But I was no longer the person who needed their validation to feel complete. That evening I told Lucas about the unexpected contact. Are you going to reconnect with them? He asked carefully. On my terms, I answered. Not as the daughter seeking approval, but as the woman who knows her own worth. He nodded, understanding. Just remember that whatever you decide, you have a family here who sees you clearly and loves what we see. In that moment, surrounded by the life I had built from the ashes of rejection, I felt a profound gratitude. The painful words that had driven me away had ultimately set me free to discover who I could become without the weight of impossible expectations. The journey ahead with my biological family would be complicated, potentially healing, but no longer essential to my sense of self-worth. I had found my voice, my vision, and my value, not despite leaving, but because of it. When the voicemail came nearly 2 years after I'd walked away from my family home, I almost didn't listen to it. Unknown numbers usually meant work solicitations or wrong numbers. But something intuition perhaps made me press play as I prepared dinner in my apartment. Ivy, it's Dad. The voice sounded older, hesitant, in a way I'd never associated with my father. I know it's been a long time, and I have no right to ask anything of you. But please, if you get this message, please call home. Your mother… His voice cracked slightly. Your mother would really like to see you. We all would. Please come home even if it's just for a day. I stood, frozen wooden spoon dripping tomato sauce onto the kitchen floor. In the background of my father's message, I could hear the steady beep of hospital monitors. The website project with my mother had proceeded professionally over the previous months, with our interactions gradually warming from formal to cautiously friendly. She had mentioned my father's continued recovery, his retirement from the engineering firm, and his newfound interest in woodworking as therapy for both mind and body. But there had been no hint of a medical crisis. I called my mother immediately. What happened? I asked when she answered, skipping greeting formalities. Pneumonia, she replied, sounding exhausted. It developed suddenly 3 days ago, with his heart condition. She didn't need to finish the thought. Pneumonia was dangerous for anyone with cardiovascular issues. How serious is it? They're optimistic, but he's not young anymore, Ivy. The unspoken request hung between us. I'll catch a flight tomorrow, I said after a brief pause. Text me the hospital details. After ending the call, I sat heavily on my couch, emotions swirling. 2 years of building a life independent of my family's approval of healing from their rejection of finding my worth outside their narrow definition of success, and now this pullback toward the source of so much pain. Lucas arrived an hour later, having left work early when I texted him about the situation. You don't owe them your presence, he said gently as we discussed the situation. Not after everything. I know, I acknowledged. but I think I need this closure, whatever form it takes. And maybe, I hesitated, maybe they've truly changed. Mom has been different during our project work. Just remember who you are now, he said, squeezing my hand. You're not that person seeking validation anymore. You're Ivy Westbrook award-winning designer, amazing fiancé, and the strongest person I know. I smiled at his declaration. Will you come with me? Of course, all the way. The next afternoon found us driving a rental car from Detroit Metropolitan Airport toward the hospital. In my hometown, the familiar landscape both comforting and alienating after my 2-year absence. Lucas maintained a steady, reassuring presence beside me, occasionally squeezing my hand when he sensed my anxiety rising. The hospital room was easier to find than the right emotions for this reunion. Outside the door, I paused, smoothing my blouse, a design I'd created myself, professionally produced through a small batch manufacturer I'd connected with through my environmental client. Ready? Lucas asked. As I'll ever be. The scene inside was both expected and surprising. My father looked smaller somehow, his formerly imposing frame diminished against white hospital linens. My mother sat beside him holding his hand, while Justin stood by the window scrolling through his phone. They all looked up simultaneously as we entered, expressions shifting from surprise to something I couldn't quite name. Ivy, my mother breathed, standing quickly. You came. I said I would, I replied simply. An awkward silence followed, broken by Lucas stepping forward to introduce himself. My mother embraced him immediately, thanking him for coming, while Justin offered a handshake and a nod of acknowledgement. My father remained silent, his eyes never leaving my face. How are you feeling? I asked him directly, moving to the foot of his bed. Better now, he said, his voice rougher than in the voicemail. The doctors say the antibiotics are working. Another silence fell, heavy with unspoken history. Could we have a moment? My father asked, suddenly looking around the room. Just Ivy and me. My mother looked surprised but nodded, ushering Lucas and Justin out with promises of cafeteria coffee. When the door closed, leaving us alone, I moved to the chair my mother had vacated but maintained a careful distance. You look well, my father said after a moment. Successful. I am, I confirmed without elaboration. He nodded slowly. Good. That's good. He seemed to be struggling for words, something I'd never witnessed before. My father had always known exactly what to say, particularly when it came to criticism or expectations. Why did you call me Dad? I asked directly, my tone gentle but firm. After 2 years of silence. He looked down at his hands, age spots now visible where I didn't remember them before. Because I was wrong, he said finally, the words coming with visible effort. About everything. I waited, giving him space to continue. When you left, he shook his head. I was angry at first. Thought you were being dramatic, proving my point about emotional artists. A self-deprecating smile crossed his face. Took me months to realize you weren't coming back. That we had truly driven you away. You told me I was a burden. I reminded him, the words still carrying a sting despite the distance time had provided. Justin said no one would miss me. And you believed us, he said, meeting my eyes. That's what keeps me awake at night, Ivy. That you believed us because we had spent years making you feel that way. The admission was more than I had expected, more acknowledgement than I had thought him capable of. The heart attack changed things, he continued. Makes you think about what matters. And then your mother started working with you on her website, seeing your success, your talent. We watched you from afar through social media, through the professional recognition you were receiving. Social media stalking your estranged daughter isn't reconciliation, I pointed out. No, he agreed. It's cowardice. We were afraid to reach out, afraid you'd reject us the way we rejected you. And we would have deserved it. He reached for the water cup on his bedside table, and I instinctively moved to help him. Our fingers brushed as I handed him the cup, the first physical contact in 2 years. I was wrong about your career, about your choices, he said after drinking. I was wrong to compare you to Justin, to measure your worth by my limited understanding of success. Most of all, I was wrong to make you feel like a burden when you are and have always been a gift. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. Why now? Because you're sick. Because I'm running out of time to fix my mistakes, he answered honestly. Not just because of this, he gestured to the hospital room, but because life is shorter than we think. And I don't want to leave this world with my daughter believing I didn't love her. Did you? I asked the question that had haunted me for years, finally spoken aloud. Love me, I mean. Not just as an obligation, but for who I am. Always, he said without hesitation. Imperfectly, conditionally filtered through my own insecurities and limited vision. But yes, I loved you. I just didn't know how to love someone so different from myself. The admission broke something loose inside me, a knot of pain I had carried for so long I'd stopped noticing its weight. I've built a life I'm proud of, I told him, with people who support my dreams and celebrate my successes, no matter how unconventional. As you should have. He nodded. I'm not asking you to come back to what was. That relationship was broken and rightfully so. I'm asking if we can build something new, something better based on who we all are now. It was more insight and self-awareness than I had ever heard from my father. Whether it was the heart attack, the pneumonia, or simply time and reflection that had changed him, I couldn't say. But the change itself was undeniable. I can't promise anything, I said honestly, but I'm willing to try slowly with boundaries. That's more than I deserve, he replied. Thank you. When my mother, Justin, and Lucas returned, they found us in quiet conversation about my recent projects and his new woodworking hobby. The tension had eased, not disappeared, but transformed into something navigable. Justin approached me as our father dozed off the medication, making him drowsy. I owe you an apology, he said without preamble. What I said that night was cruel and untrue. It was... I agreed, not making it easier for him. I missed you, he admitted, looking uncomfortable with the vulnerability. Turns out you were actually the glue holding a lot of family conversations together. Without you, we just talked about work and sports over and over. The image made me smile despite myself. Sounds thrilling. It wasn't, he confirmed. And watching Mom and Dad realize what they'd lost, what we'd all lost, was sobering. I've done a lot of thinking about how I contributed to making you feel less valued. It wasn't a complete apology, but like my father's words, it represented more self-reflection than I had previously thought Justin capable of. People could change, it seemed, when forced to confront the consequences of their actions. My mother joined us, her eyes moving between Justin and me with cautious hope. Will you stay for dinner? Your father should be discharged tomorrow if the improvement continues. I glanced at Lucas, who nodded slightly, leaving the decision entirely to me. We have a hotel reservation for tonight, I said. But yes, dinner would be good. Not at the house, though, I added, setting a boundary. Maybe that Italian place on Maple? Perfect, my mother agreed, immediately understanding the significance of neutral territory. As we prepared to leave, promising to return the next morning, my mother pulled me aside. The website you designed for me has changed my entire retirement plan, she said. I've received so many messages from teachers saying how helpful it's been. Your vision made that possible. The professional acknowledgement meant more coming from her than from any client or award committee. I'm glad it's successful, I said sincerely. You've always seen possibilities where others didn't, she continued. It's your gift. I'm sorry we tried to change that instead of celebrating it. In the elevator heading down to the parking garage, Lucas asked, How are you feeling about all this? I considered the question carefully. Cautiously optimistic, I decided. They seem genuinely changed, but real reconciliation will take time and consistent effort on their part. I won't compromise my boundaries or my sense of self-worth. And you shouldn't, he affirmed. But from what I saw in there, they finally see the amazing woman I've always seen. The dinner that evening was surprisingly comfortable, filled with genuine questions about my life in Chicago, my design business, and my relationship with Lucas. My mother produced a folder containing printed copies of articles mentioning my work and award announcements she had collected over the months. Justin showed unexpected interest in my creative process, asking thoughtful questions about how I approached different client challenges. 2 days later, with my father discharged and recovering at home, Lucas and I prepared to return to Chicago. The visit had been healing in ways I hadn't anticipated, not erasing the past, but creating possibility for a different future. We'd like to visit sometime, my mother said as we stood in the driveway preparing to leave. See your life there if that would be okay. Let's plan for that, I agreed. Maybe in a few months when Dad is fully recovered. My father, standing with the support of a cane, reached for my hand. I'm proud of you, Ivy. He said the words I had once desperately craved, now offered freely. Not because of your success, but because of who you are, your resilience, your integrity, your vision. The validation no longer defined my worth, but it still touched something deep within me. Thank you, I said simply. As Lucas and I drove away, heading back toward the life we had built, I felt a sense of completion, not because family relationships had been magically healed in a few days, but because I had returned on my own terms as a whole person, no longer seeking external approval to feel complete. You know what the strangest part is? I mused as the familiar streets of my hometown receded behind us. If they hadn't said those horrible things that night, I might never have found the strength to leave to build my own life, to discover what I'm capable of. Sometimes the most painful moments lead to the most necessary growth, Lucas observed. True. I agreed. I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone, but I'm grateful for who I've become because of it. The highway stretched before us, leading back to Chicago, to our apartment, to the community of friends who had become family, to clients who valued my vision, to a life constructed choice by choice, day by day, on the foundation of self-worth I had built from scratch. I was no longer a burden, not to my family, and most importantly, not to myself. I had become a woman who carried her own weight and helped others lighten theirs, who created beauty and meaning through work that mattered, who loved and was loved without conditions or expectations. The journey from that painful dinner table to this moment of clarity had been winding and difficult but necessary. And while reconciliation with my family might continue to evolve with steps forward and occasional steps back, my internal reconciliation, the peace I had made with my own path and choices, was complete. Have you ever had to walk away from something or someone to find yourself? Did you later reconcile, or was the separation permanent? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that. Sometimes leaving is the most powerful act of self-love. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you are never a burden when you're living your authentic truth.